You walked
realizing it.
into a room with a clear purpose.
This is why
You
forgetting
had
can
something
happen even
specific to
during
do.
easy
And the
reading.
moment you crossed the threshold,
Short
it
emails,
vanished.
simple
Not because
articles,
you're
and
distracted,
casual posts
not because you're
often
not trying
disappear
hard
faster
enough,
than
but
complex
because of something
material.
far more fundamental
Your
about how
brain
your
treats
brain
them as
actually
low
works.
priority
This
and
happens
invests
to you
less effort in
multiple
holding
times a
onto
day.
them.
You stand up from your desk
Digital
with intention,
environments make
walk
this
10
even
feet,
harder.
and suddenly you're
When you
standing there
read
with
on a
no
phone or
idea what you
laptop,
came for.
your brain
You pick up
stays
your
in a
phone to
state of
check one
partial
thing, and within
alertness.
seconds the original
It
reason
is
is
always
gone.
prepared for
You
the
open
next
the fridge,
notification,
stare
message,
inside,
or tab.
and cannot for the life of you
Even if
remember what
nothing
you needed.
interrupts you,
The
that
usual
readiness, you
explanation is that
reread
you're
the same
scattered or
paragraph
stressed or just
multiple
not paying
times and still
attention.
feel
But
lost.
that's not it. This
The
isn't about
usual
focus.
explanation is
It's
simple.
about the
I wasn't
architecture of
paying
memory
attention.
itself. Your brain
It
doesn't
sounds
store
reasonable,
intentions the way
and
you
it
think it
fits our
does.
cultures of
When you
multitasking
decide to do
suggests
something,
that
that
switching between
decision isn't
tasks,
filed
even
away like a
briefly,
document.
leaves
It
lasting
exists
residue.
as an active pattern of neural
I just read
activity,
this,
held
but it already
temporarily in what's
feels
called
unfamiliar.
working memory. And
That
working
moment
memory
can
is
feel
shockingly
embarrassing,
fragile.
but it
Research
isn't a
shows that
personal
working memory
failure.
can only hold a few pieces
Most
of
people
information at
quietly
once,
assume
and
it
only
means
for
they
a very
weren't
short
focused
period of
enough.
time. It's designed for
They think they
immediate
were
use, not
distracted,
storage.
lazy,
The
or
moment
mentally
something
weak in
interrupts
that
that
moment.
active pattern, the information
But
doesn't
research
just
on
fade.
attention and
It
memory
can disappear
suggests something
entirely.
very different
Walking
is
through a
usually
doorway
happening.
is one of the most reliable
This
triggers.
experience shows up in
Studies have
small,
found that
ordinary
passing through a
moments.
doorway creates what's called an
You read
event
an
boundary.
email at work
Your
and
brain treats it
immediately
as the
forget
end of one
everything
context and the
starts to
beginning
blur
of another.
together.
And when the context
You are still
changes,
working,
working
still
memory often
responding,
resets.
still
This
functioning,
isn't a glitch. It's
but
a
very
feature.
little
Your
of it
brain is
sticks.
constantly managing what's
The
relevant
system
to
is
your
running,
current
but
environment.
it is running
When
on
you
low
move
power.
from the
Get
living
what it
room to the
asked you to
kitchen,
do.
your brain shifts
You
gears.
scroll through an
It
article and later can't
deprioritizes
explain its
information
main
tied to the
point.
previous space and prepares
Managing
for new
emotional
input.
states.
The intention you were holding
None of
gets
this feels
deprioritized
dramatic,
along with
but it
everything else.
consumes mental
This is why you can
resources.
remember a task perfectly
Studies
while
on
sitting at your
working memory
desk,
show
but
that
the
you can
moment you
only
stand
hold a
up and
small
walk
amount
toward
of
the supply
information
closet,
in
it
an active,
evaporates.
usable
The act
form
of
at
moving
once.
doesn't just change your
When that
location.
space is
It
crowded,
changes your
new
mental state.
information has
The same
nowhere
thing
to
happens
settle.
when you pick up your phone.
It
You
passes
unlock it
through
with a
without
specific
being
goal,
stored.
but the screen
So
itself
when
is an
you
event
read,
boundary.
the words may
The
reach your
visual
eyes,
shift, the
but they never
interface,
fully
the
enter
flood of
that
icons
limited
and
mental
notifications
workspace.
create a new
They are
context.
processed
Your brain
just enough
switches
to feel
modes,
familiar,
and the
then
original
discarded.
intention, which was never firmly
It feels
encoded,
like reading,
simply
but it
drops
is
out of
more like
active
skimming
memory.
without
You
sea.
open your email to send
They
one
think
message,
something is
and by the
wrong
time
with
the
their
app loads,
intelligence
you're
or
scrolling
attention
through your
span.
inbox with no
But
recollection
the
of what you
pattern
meant to
appears
write.
across age
You go to
groups,
search for something, and
professions,
the moment
and
the search
educational
bar appears,
obsession
the
with
word you were
focus
looking
and
for is
discipline.
gone. This
But it
isn't poor
doesn't
memory.
explain why
This
this
is how
happens
working
even
memory
when you feel
behaves when
like you are
contexts
paying
shift.
attention.
Even small
You can be
environmental
sitting
changes can
quietly,
do this.
phone face
You
down,
stand up,
genuinely
you
trying
turn
to
around,
concentrate,
you
and
glance at
still
something
part of
else.
your mind
Each of
stays
these
with the
actions
previous
creates a
activity.
micro-transition, and each
When you
transition
start
gives your
reading,
brain
you are
permission
not
to let
starting
go of
from
what it was
zero.
holding. What makes this
So
worse
you
is
may
that
be
working
reading
memory
while
is also
still mentally
vulnerable to
finishing a
interference.
conversation,
If something else
replaying
grabs
a
your
video,
attention,
or
even
planning
for a
your next
second,
task.
it can overwrite the
None
intention
of
you were
this
holding.
feels like
Someone asks you a
distraction.
question while you're walking to
It
the
just
printer.
feels like
A
being
notification
normal.
pops up. You
Another
notice something out of
factor is
place.
mental
The new
fatigue.
input doesn't just distract you.
After hours of
It
thinking,
actively displaces
deciding,
the
and
previous thought.
reacting, your
And
brain
once it's
becomes less
gone, it's
efficient at
gone.
encoding
You
new
can't
information.
always retrieve it by
It
retracing
does
your
not
steps,
shut down,
because
but
the
it becomes
intention was never
selective.
stored. It only
When you are
existed as an
tired,
active
your mind
process. When
prioritizes
that
immediate
process
demands
stops,
over
there's
long-term
nothing left to
storage.
recover. This is
It
deeply
focuses
uncomfortable
on
because
getting
it
through the
reveals
moment
something
rather
most
than
people don't
building
want to
lasting
accept.
memory.
You are not in full
Reading
control of
becomes
what you
shallow,
remember
even
moment
if
to
you
moment.
care about
Your
the
sense of
content.
having a stable, continuous
This
stream
often
of thought
shows
is
up in
partly an
office
illusion.
environments.
What you're aware of right now
You
is
read
all your brain
reports,
is actively
messages,
holding.
and documents
Everything else
all
is
day.
either stored long-term
By
or
the after,
temporarily
have you
gone.
ever read a page,
You've probably
nodded
noticed this
along,
when you try to
felt like
hold
you
multiple
understood it,
intentions
and
at
then
once.
realized a
You
few
tell
seconds
yourself you
later
need to
that
grab
none
your
of it
water
stayed with
bottle,
you?
reply to a
You
message,
look
and check
back
the
at the
time.
words and think,
You
you'll
stand
forget
up,
what you just
and
read.
immediately one of those three
There are
things
no
is gone.
obvious
Not
distractions
because
in
you're
the room.
incapable, but because working
And
memory
yet,
has a
the
limit.
information
You
slips
exceeded
away
it.
almost
Something
instantly.
had to drop. This is
Research
why writing
suggests
things
that
down
attention is
works.
is not a single
because
switch
it helps
you
you
turn
remember
on.
better, but because it
It is a
removes the need to
fragile,
hold the
limited
information
system that is
actively.
constantly
Once it's
being pulled in
external, your
different
working memory
directions,
is free,
even when you
but
feel
most of the
calm.
time, you don't
Your
write
brain
things
is
down.
always
You
processing
assume
more
you'll
than you
remember,
realize.
and you're wrong.
When
The
you
real
read,
issue
your brain
is
is
that you
doing
don't
several
notice
things
how
at
often
once.
this happens until
It
it
is
inconveniences
recognizing
you.
words,
Most
connecting them
forgotten
to meaning,
intentions are
checking
small
them
enough that
against
they
what
don't
you
matter.
already know,
You forget
and
why you
deciding
opened a
whether they
tab.
are
You
important.
forget what you were about to
All
say.
of this
You
happens
forget what you walked into the
automatically
kitchen
and
for,
quietly.
so you just grab a snack
At the same
instead and move
time,
on.
your
But
mind is still running
occasionally it does
background
matter.
processes.
You forget to send an
It
important
is monitoring
message.
time,
You forget the
thinking
one
about
thing you needed
upcoming
from the
tasks,
store.
reacting
You forget
to
a
small
point you were about to
sensations,
make in a
and
meeting,
much remains.
and when that happens, you blame
Part
yourself.
of your attention
You
is
think you should have
reserved
tried
for what
harder
might
to
happen
remember.
next.
But trying harder doesn't fix a
divided state
structural
weakens
limitation.
memory
Working
formation.
memory doesn't improve because
Research
you
on
care
media
more.
multiples.
It operates within fixed
It
constraints.
reflects how
You
modern
can't force it to
cognitive
hold more than it's
environments
designed to
operate.
hold. You can't
We are
prevent event
surrounded by
boundaries from
information,
resetting it. You
demands,
can't stop
and low-level
interference from overriding
stimulation.
it. What this means
Our
is that
brains
forgetting
adapt
what
by
you were about to
conserving
do
effort
isn't a
wherever
failure.
possible.
It's a consequence of moving through the
Forgetting
world.
quickly is not
Every
a
time you
defect.
shift contexts,
It is
every
often
time you
a
transition between tasks,
emotional background
every time your
also
attention is
matters.
pulled somewhere else,
Mild
you're
stress,
creating conditions that
uncertainty,
make
or
forgetting
pressure
likely.
quietly competes
You're not
with
broken.
reading.
You're not declining.
Your brain
You're
keeps
not losing
scanning
your
for
edge.
potential
You're
problems in the
experiencing the normal
background.
behavior of a brain that was
Even
never designed
low-level
to hold
worries use
fleeting
cognitive
intentions across
resources.
environmental transitions.
You may not
This
feel
doesn't mean
anxious,
you're
but
powerless.
part of your mind
It
is
just
busy
means the
managing
solution
unease.
isn't willpower. It's not
That
about
leaves less
remembering
space for
harder.
new
It's about
information.
recognizing that some things your
Another
brain simply
uncomfortable
won't
truth
hold
is that
and planning
familiarity
around that
creates an
fact
illusion
instead of
of
fighting it.
understanding.
But even knowing this,
When
you'll
something
still walk
looks
into a
clear and
room and
simple,
forget why
your
you're
brain
there.
assumes
You'll
it does
still
not
pick up
need
your
deep
phone and lose your
processing.
original thought.
It
Because
relaxes
understanding
too
why it
early.
happens doesn't change the
You
mechanics, it
recognize
just
the
changes
words,
whether you
follow
blame
the
yourself when
sentences,
it does.
and feel like you
And maybe
understand.
that's enough. Maybe
But
the
you never
point isn't
fully
to fix
integrate
it.
the meaning.
Maybe the point is to stop treating it like a
Without that
personal
deeper
failing and start
processing,
seeing it for
memory
what it
remains
is.
weak.
A quiet, persistent
This
reminder
is
that
why
your mind is
rereading
not a
often
filing
feels
cabinet.
strange.
It's a live process,
The material
constantly
looks
shifting,
familiar,
constantly
yet
resetting,
empty.
constantly
You
deciding
remember
what matters
seeing it,
right now.
but not
And
absorbing it.
sometimes what mattered
Many
5
people
seconds ago
interpret this
just
as
doesn't
personal
make the cut.
inadequacy.